Hi there, this is Anthony from Force Ghost Conversations, and you are listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast. Great pull, kid.
Tell me what comes into your mind.
Everything's gonna be all right, kid.
You found the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid.
I'm your host, Greg McLaughlin.
Have I made a few bad decisions? Sure.
We talk about cards, collecting Star Wars, and to people in the Star Wars community.
Don't worry, we're gonna meet up with some friends of mine.
Look for special episodes called The Breakfast Pack, talking about your favorite Star Wars shows.
We will never have a better chance than this.
All right, let's get started.
Well, perhaps it is time to begin again.
Welcome back, or if this is your first episode, welcome aboard. My name is Greg McLaughlin, and this is the Rebel Base Card Podcast. And also, this is Labor Day weekend, depending upon when you're downloading this. Of course, this is next week. Hey, I hope your weekend was good. But this weekend is yet to come. And so I was looking for a nice, easy listening pod for the weekend. Nothing too crazy. We're not going to talk about people putting boxes of cards under CAT scans to see what those hits are. You can listen to other podcasts for that, or other assorted drama. Of course, we did have the Burbank Card Show, now the West Coast Card Show, or all that, where you can see all the great stuff that have happened in the world of cards. I'm just happy that I found a blaster box of Star Wars Topps Chrome, still in my local GameStop, still up plenty on the shelf, although hobby boxes have gone double in price, depending upon where you get them, because of all that pent-up demand. Well, that's what happens when you release your first basically new product, August of 2024. So we darn near ran out of 2024 before we got that, but that's not what this podcast is about. I have one Anthony King from Force Ghost Conversations, who has been on the podcast before. I can say friend of the podcast without getting like, no. I don't feel like I'm going to put words in his mouth. Who's been running Force Ghost Conversations for nearly 3 years now. November, right?
Yep.
So he's here. He just came back from D23. Now, if you're listening to multiple Star Wars podcasts, a lot of D23 ground has been covered. But yes, dear listener, I have found some ground that I think is yet to be covered, and really it's about me. That's how I want to kind of put this. I am about trying to figure out, do I need to be thinking about D23 here in a couple years? So Anthony was nice to take the call, as it were, because he did such a great job of covering it. He was out there. I know Dan Zare was out there. So Anthony King, I want to welcome you to the podcast, welcome you back to the podcast. And how are you doing on the cusp of Labor Day weekend?
Well, thank you so much for having me back on the show, Greg. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's always a weekend somewhere. So if or you're very close to weekend, no matter where you're at. So, if everyone's either listening to this post Labor Day, I mean, you're always a few days away from a weekend. That's the way I look at it. So I hope everyone's enjoying their weekends or Labor Days or whatever you're having. And I personally am going to enjoy mine with some rest and relaxation. And who knows? I might throw on an Indiana Jones movie or two. Ooh. And watch some Rings of Power. The sky's the limit, frankly.
That's right. I had just noticed today that we are about too deep into Rings of Power, and so I need to kind of like buckle down and get through it, because if we know Rings of Power Season 1... Hi, this just turned into an episode of the Colby Cast. Hi, Colby. It's dense. I mean, we're not talking Picard. Let's just put that out there. Picard was dense. Picard was like, don't make any plans, don't have an alcoholic beverage. You need to sit down and pay attention. But I felt that the Rings of Power was sort of only because the characters you had only a cursory knowledge of. But hey, speaking of which, did you see the War of the Rohirrim? The
Rohirrim.
Rohirrim.
Yes, I saw that trailer. Yeah, it looked real good. I was excited to see some of the animation, because I know they've been. It's kind of late in the game for them to be releasing a first trailer for this when it comes out in December, and this is kind of the first look that we've seen of it in action. So I think it looks great, and I'm excited to see what the story is. And it seems like there's some familiar players into the classic Lord of the Rings films that we all know and love from the early 2000s involved in this. So I think it's great, and I'm glad to see Peter Jackson back in the fold, and that can only lead to, I think, for more good things in the future from that franchise.
I kind of like that take because it's like it's one of those where it's like you think that Middle Earth is fairly mined because we did have the Lord of the Rings, we had the three Hobbit movies, and now Rings of Power season 2. But you kind of go, you know what? Speaking of Star Wars, the world that we kind of live in, you're like, yeah, there's a whole lot they could probably mine. And I think an anime style movie would be kind of a nice ticket to get in not only younger viewers, but you go, you know what? Do you feel like it takes a little pressure off going? Do you feel in general sometimes animation takes a little pressure off to go as opposed to live action? Obviously we don't need to tread a lot of ground of the Acolyte, although I'm sure everybody's been talking about it. Sure, you've been talking about it. But it is something where it's like, is this sort of one of those where it's like, I can just go maybe and enjoy it, and we don't have to worry about this as wrecking or saving the franchise.
Yeah, I think the same way as like a Clone Wars, right? It's given this kind of blank slate grace in some ways that live action isn't given. So I think if you want to explore a story 200 years prior to the War of the Ring, absolutely go for it. And to use it via an animated format, I think it's a win for everybody because it keeps the franchise alive to some degree. It's cheaper to produce. Animation is just historically cheaper to do than having to hire actors and develop sets and book locations for these things. So I think it only can lead to more positive things, and I love the animation medium overall and the creativity that it offers. And I think this is obviously, I mean, I think that this is a franchise that has a ton of, I don't want to keep using the word lore, but lore behind it in terms of every page could lead to a tip of the iceberg of storytelling, right? You can turn one way and there's another story and adventure to be had that way. You go another way and there's 15 other stories that can result because of that too. So with this kind of being a blueprint for Star Wars in many ways, at least something that influenced Lucas in developing those first drafts of Star Wars, I'm all for it. I can't wait to see it. And the holiday season just seems to be lined up with a lot of great content with this and Mufasa, the new Lion King film, the new Sonic film at the same time. Seems like there's going to be a lot for people to choose to go to the theater and see.
Yeah, it does seem that everybody's sort of heading back to the theater. It's interesting that we talk like with Lord of the Rings or Middle Earth having its own franchise, and you think about like you have been a big champion of what is it, Rebel Moon Rising?
Rebel Moon. Yeah, just
Rebel Moon. Sorry, Rebel Moon.
You got the Rebel Rising book conflated in there.
There we go. But that is also something where it's like someone with an eye for creating a movie, but also with an eye on a franchise because there's a lot of money in it. Toy Story, whatever we're on at the moment. But, it is kind of interesting. But I think let's just say for someone like yourself dipping into Rebel Moon, you go, well, there's a lot more to this, and it doesn't have to be a one and done. And if I like it, I can look forward to all this other ancillary material.
Sure. And, I mean, it's something that all these streaming services are looking for, right? They're looking for that thing that breaks through the zeitgeist and becomes this cultural phenomenon that they can basically milk everything from it, whether it be 1,000 movie sequels, spin-off films, spin-off TV series. They're looking for that next big thing. I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars were probably the biggest foundational pieces for that mindset. I think a Stranger Things also really helped to create this era that we live in when it comes to the streamers and what they decide to put their money behind. But they're all looking for this big blockbuster hit, and I think I take it or leave it. I've been a big fan of what Rebel Moon has done. I haven't actually seen the director's cuts yet, just because they came out at a time where I was heading to D23, and I wanted to give them the just due of time, where they're both 3 hours long, and I want to watch them with my sound system at home the way I would like to, rather than watching them on my iPhone or iPad in between my work travel that I did immediately after D23 and the family vacation I had in the lead up to it. But they've brought back a ton of different things, such as like investing in the novelizations for for the movies, the adaptations for them, and they also have done comics already in the same universe of Rebel Moon, and recently they've also started a podcast based in the universe too, which has been really excellent about one of the history of one of the characters featured in that, and that's been outstanding personally so far. So I hope that maybe it's an opportunity for organization. I mean, frankly, it was only made for 180 million too, and they got 4 movies out of it. So if you're talking about making the most out of your buck for it, like that's a pretty good amount of content for just the amount of money that they put behind it.
Yeah, it's interesting, listening to what the Forcecast earlier today talking about, like when, let's say, The Acolyte was first announced back in 2020, back then, someone throwing $180 million out there sounds like, yeah, that sounds about right for however long you're going to make it. But we are not in 2020. We are in 2024, and everybody's like watching their budgets. And so now you start to think, as we kind of get into a brave new world, I mean, it's interesting on the one hand, and this leads into D23, is on the one hand, we all know now, it's like, I remember talking to Mark Newbold from Panther Tracks about now, do we have to kind of keep an ear on all the Disney financial calls and things like, how is Disney doing?
Yes, you do.
At the same time, when they come out at a celebration or D23 or just an announcement going, hey, we're doing all this, and part of you now has to go like, how are we doing on funds, folks? Do we have money for this? And so,
and are we going to pull the plug after 4 episodes already?
Exactly.
Like, should I get invested in this? And it's a hard thing for consumers because with the streaming world, we don't know what the metrics are in order for something to be considered a success. That is so far behind our paywalls that there's a degree of separation from fans to the creators, not the creators, actually the creators themselves, but we're talking the executives of like a Disney, a Warner Brothers, whoever is actually paying the bills for the creators to go out and do the stuff here. And so it's like, I don't know if me just watching a show anymore is good enough to say like, I back this, I want it to be successful, I want to see more of this. Does it need to have, if you look at it from this point of view, right, $180 million, right? And if that was a live action movie and put into theaters, that would need to make roughly 800 million in a box office return in order to see a profit, which is an astronomical number. And if you hit that $800 million number, that movie is a big phenomenon across the globe. So if that's the equivalent, then all these streaming shows that are given similar budgets are almost set to fail from the beginning, which is a hard thing to put on something from the start. Now, I don't blame any like if you're going to pay someone $180 million to make something, then that's fantastic, good for them. But you're also at the same regard setting them up in a way for failure, if you ask my opinion on that one. So like, it's really tough to break through that mold, and I'm sad to see more shows falling through the wayside on this, and streamers are getting more cognizant of this too. Like I know Netflix is often the joke is if you get you won't get a third season, they'll cancel you before you get to a third one because they know you have to pay the actors more. It's in like the contract with Netflix or something like that. If you get to a third season, it's kind of lights out. So it's tough of being a fan these days in many ways.
Gosh, and this might just be the coffee talking, but could you actually see a time, where, I think there's a lot of places that have talked about, like Disney would really like release movie, let it go in theaters for a while, then port it over to Disney Plus. Could you almost see a time where if like, all right, we're going to do a long form story for Star Wars. We're going to break it up into, let's just say 3 increments of maybe 2 hours apiece. We're going to release it in the theaters to pick up some revenue, and then 2 months later drop it on Disney Plus, so that you wouldn't necessarily maybe have to make 800 million, but they could make back maybe their production costs, and then they just throw it on there. And I'm like, if I was to say, hey, they're going to put Ahsoka season 2 in the theaters in June and then release it in October, you and me would be there, like without question. We'd be there day
and
one.
Many others would be too. Absolutely.
Podcasting on day 2.
Even leaving, going in the ride home.
Yeah, really be like, here, we're going to get an episode in between our viewings. And then, so it's like, I don't think that's something like that, as crazy as it sounds, is off the table.
I don't think so either. And I don't understand personally why that isn't a part of the model to begin with right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are many episodes of, and the quality of Star Wars television since the Disney Plus era is almost cinematic in many ways. Um, and I would love to have seen a lot of these episodes on the big screen. I'm thinking that Mando season 2 finale, for example, right? That would have been fantastic to have seen in the theater. You couple episodes 7 and 8 together, right? You see that in the movie theater, you have a great time. I would pay top tier premium for that experience personally. I would still pay for it now, knowing all the things that happened to it. So if they still were to go back and to throw stuff in there, I don't know how necessarily the funds for streaming works, to be honest. I know that there are the funding revenue of, obviously I pay my subscription amount and everyone else pays their subscription amount, and that will tally up the numbers at the end of the day that they have in their bucket of like, okay, this is how much we've made on this thing. Here are sunk costs, and here are the funds that we want to distribute for production to create new content for this thing to keep people subscribed, so we keep this mountain of cash really high, and then the rest in between that is profit for them. And it just seems like they've said recently that now they're profitable with this stuff, but I don't understand why you would leave money on the table such as that, because I think people would obviously people go to the theater and then they watch it on a streaming service later. I also don't understand why you don't kind of starve the audience a bit, have it in the theater, and then you see it on rent at home within like 3 weeks for a lot of movies that are in theaters nowadays. They're trying to recoup a quick buck, it seems like, but sometimes films do have a resurgence 3 or 4 weeks later, and they have long legs, and it can happen. And stranger things have happened, of course. And then I would argue that you should do a physical media release first, because I gotta think that makes more money than just putting it on a streaming platform to begin with. The whole model's kind of out of whack these days, and I think the pandemic really hurt that, definitely. But they really haven't found their footing, and it's upsetting. And as a fan, you're seeing it with The Acolyte. I saw it 2 years ago with Willow, right? As soon as the show, and then it taken off. I can't even watch it. There are many days where I'm like, I would love to watch an episode of this, and I can't find it. It's not available. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, did we finish is in fact the golden age of streaming done? And are we now, and do you think you'll ever see 2 Star Wars Disney Plus series overlap again?
I don't think so, and I don't think Marvel's going to overlap with it either. I think they were very careful about that, and then at a certain point they reached a hedge point where everything was kind of overlapping with each other, which I thought was great. I mean, it kind of it was hard for doing a podcast. Do I do 2 episodes on each of them? Do I talk about both in the same episode? But frankly, it was a good problem to have. I can't really complain as a person that grew up in some of the dark times of this, where it's like, all right, 2006, right? You're like, well, I got the DVDs now. I guess that's kind of it. And then 2007, you still have a whole blank period before Clone Wars comes out. So I don't know. I'll take all the content. I've really appreciated and enjoyed just about everything that's come out. But I think they're putting the brakes on everything. It seems like all streaming services are doing this too, and it's not just Disney Plus, which just for some reason comes to the forefront when a lot of people want to talk about failures of the streaming era. Netflix too has had their losses over the last couple of years, and definitely Max, HBO Max, the many iterations that's went through has
Oh my goodness,
seen some things, and I miss the days of knowing that you had a season every year to look forward to of a new show versus, all right, a show came out, there were 6 to 8 episodes of it, and now if you're lucky to get a season 2, hope you like it in 2 years. We didn't start filming right away. We started 6 months after production wrapped, or the series wrapped on that first season, and then hope you still like us by the time we come back around again.
Well, yeah, it's funny because let's just say you fire up Pluto, and you're gonna see, if you're a Star Trek fan, you can see, Voyager, you can see DS9, you can see the original series, and Next Generation, and they made so many that they can continuously stream them, like however many seasons
it's on channel, yeah.
And you go in there and go, oh, I hope this is a good one. I mean, like that seems like such a foreign concept to go. And trust me, there were some stinkers in Next Generation. I mean, like it came back. It took a couple seasons. You
think
about
several seasons to get its footing. I agree. Yeah.
And then you start to go, even in the later seasons, you're going to go, all right, masks. No, I'm going to take a pass on that. Or maybe if there's 15 minutes left, you go, okay, well, there's the next one coming up that's actually pretty good, and I'll go on that one. But yeah, it's, you know, it is quite interesting. And I think that, you know, as a longtime Star Wars fan, like we all are, that you were looking for that consistency. Like, you know, like we'll take whatever you can get. We'll crunch all you want. We'll do it. But we're okay if you take your time, produce something, make some money, because I'd like to see more than one.
I want to see
and
more.
Then, and then maybe commit to going, you know, maybe commit to a smaller series, but give us 2 seasons of it. You know, that way you can kind of generate some income, and by all means, don't do to Echo what you did to Echo. And, you know, even after you know better, you're going to dump it all at once, a la Stranger Things. And Stranger Things is sort of a, you know, that's its own thing that you got in. But
I got
like,
lucky, frankly.
They got very lucky with that. And you know, I don't know why, but if you think about now, like the last season of, I know we're going to talk about D23, I promise. Shut up, Colby. But, you know, it's interesting because this last House of Dragons series had a whole season of behind the scenes. Like they went from
8 episodes of a whole making of.
The making of, which is, can you imagine another, like, you know, because we did that with like, what, season 1 of Mando had had a long gallery season.
Yep.
And now we're lucky if we get one. And I don't know if there was a gallery Willow, but it wasn't up there very long if it was.
There was
Oh my
one
God.
episode behind the scenes. Yeah.
And it's gone too.
Yep. And the erased from the history books.
Will we see a gallery? I mean, I guess if Acolyte's still on this, I don't think they'll pull it, but I would imagine.
Hope not. I hope they don't pull it.
I would say you would need to have a gallery, but I'm like, even that was a whole season of like, I'll take a season. I'm still not finished with it, but now after we kind of went back and watched House of the Dragon season 1, my wife and I were like, let's go back and catch up. Kind of what we kind of glossed over in the first, you know, like you go a year going, oh yeah, that's right. She's like, I missed all that. And now you're like, well, shoot, I didn't get a chance to finish the making of. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't know why, if you're going to spend all that money, make as much, you know, like there was the official House of the Dragon podcast, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to, is awesome. They do an amazing job. And yes, it's a corporate podcast, and you know, there's great other podcasts out there. But I'm like, you know, to have that access to the actors and the creators and all that, I'm like, that are still talking about it even afterwards, as, you know, we've got a long march between seasons or whatnot. You know, use the tools, use the medium, and milk it to death. And, you know, absolutely. Podcasts, as you know, it's like, if you talked about Acolyte for the next year, people would still be listening, still be like, oh yeah. Would. And at any rate,
it's going to be a hot topic, and it's hard to, as a fan, to see the business side of show business coming to the forefront more than the show itself. So that's frankly just the weird area we're in now. I'm glad Rings of, because, you know, a lot of these shows, and it's the history of television, that first season is a lot of feeling out, right? The actors are creating a chemistry with each other. The writing staff is kind of feeling their footing. It's really rare that you find a series that in season 1 breaks through the zeitgeist of everything and just is considered perfect. I don't think many people would ever consider it. Like, I hate watching pilots. It's one of the, like,
oh my goodness.
Like, I'm always like, I can't start a series with season 1, episode 1. It's always the worst. Like, you throw me into a situation, I'm like, I don't know why I'm here. Why do I care about any of these people? What's this conversation they're having about? Are they talking about lunch? I don't know. and it's really hard for them to convince me through the process of how I should be enjoying the show, if I should be at all. So I think the Clone Wars is a perfect example. If that were released today, I don't think it would get a season 2. Perhaps I think the same criticisms that the Acolyte was thrown with would have been thrown at that.
I made it through 3 episodes of Clone Wars, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of done. But then
I think as soon as the movie was released, they would have said, all right, we're pulling the plug on this one. And the fact that, you know, frankly, season 3 is where that really hit its stride for a lot of people. And they found their footing. A lot of these shows don't get the opportunity to find their footing anymore these days. I watched the first episode of season 2 of Rings of Power. I enjoyed season 1, but I did have some criticisms about pacing and just kind of character motivations and all that. that I think were perfectly fixed in season 2, episode 1. They had a chance to take the feedback over the last 2 years and implement that in the next season, which maybe the Acolyte would have done that. Maybe they'd have taken some of the notes and say, like, okay, maybe I didn't like how that turned out. Let's put some of the money here. Let's do some of this here. We were a little rushed on this at the end. Let's work through this a bit more. Maybe I rewrite a scene based off of this to make this make sense more. It might have been all for the better. It's just sad that we won't get that opportunity as of now. Maybe we'll get an opportunity again in the future, but we're still in this grieving period as a fandom where, yeah, I think a lot of people, even if you had criticisms against it, would be happy to see the story continued in some way, shape, or form. And definitely the actors, I can speak to that.
Yeah, I was going to say you
on
have
board with it.
Yeah, you have
I
a very
personal
unique
experience, I can tell you. They are excited to do more, and I think it's just sad. I keep saying that it's sad.
Well, we're gonna bring up the happy.
Yeah, let's bring it to
because
happy
we're
mode.
we're gonna talk about you meeting Manny.
Yeah.
But I want to take us back because the first time I heard about D23, oh, you got, of course, a sign.
Oh, it's upside down. There we go.
Well, this is a podcast, so nobody notices that was
Of course,
upside
no
down.
one can see. Yeah.
Manny.
Perfect for the audio medium.
The only thing better if you would have had him say, "Can't wait for season 2," and you'd be like, "Ah." Anyway, that's
Oof.
the body's not cold. The first time I heard about D23 was back in the halcyon days of Disney Infinity.
Uh-huh.
Where at D23, I think there was actually a fan voting for a character to be released. You know, I sound like an old man now talking about Disney Infinity, but that was kind of like one of the first times I'd heard about it. And I like me some Disney as much as the next person, but I am not like, I'm not at that, you know, the Hyperion Hub level yet. Shout out to the Hyperion Hub, John Elise and all those guys. But I'm like, I'm not there yet, and so it's still a bit of a mystery to me, but I am curious about where you first hear about D23 and sort of your relationship to it and or Disney.
Yeah. So I think the relationship to Disney, just first and foremost, has kind of always been a part of my life. I remember the plethora of VHS tapes that I had as a child when they would release things from the vault. Their way of removing things from the shelves back in the day. So you had to quickly scrounge up the VHS tapes before they were gone, never to be released again, according to them. So I had a big collection of those VHSs, and then eventually led to DVDs. Always enjoyed going to see new films in the cinema. I didn't really have a strong connection to a lot of Disney properties other than Toy Story for the longest time, until Pirates of the Caribbean came out, and then I was a big fanatic of those films. In terms of the parks, which I know are a big part of the Disney brand itself, I have been to the parks a few times in my life, but the first time I really remember was 2008. 2007, 2008. I can't remember the exact year at this point, but that was when my mom decided, hey, we're going to take a family vacation down there for the week. And this is the first time I fully cognitively remember being down in the parks as a 12, 13-year-old. And I remember this specifically because I used to have very long hair, Greg, and the trade-off was...
Pictures or it didn't happen, Anthony.
It definitely... I have pictures to back this up. My mom said, we are not going unless you shave that head of yours. So that was the trade-off. Yep, I remember very, very vividly cutting off this nice long punk rock head that I had, and then being able to go to Disney now because of that. So it was a fun trade, and definitely worth it in the end because I really enjoyed that trip. I got to go again in 2012 with my marching band in high school as a senior, so I got to hang out with all my friends at Disney, which I think was a really fantastic experience. And fast forward a few years later, now I finally live down here. The Mouse is 15 minutes down the road, and now that we are podcasting, it's great to be right by Galaxy's Edge and all that. So really, it's a part of my DNA in many ways. And now that when Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney, I thought, okay, this is great. Star Tours is already there. They have a familiar relationship. I know that they had purchased Marvel by that point,
right, as
well, and I trusted the way that they handled that transition. And basically, there were a lot of conversations I remember on YouTube between George, Bob Iger, and Kathleen Kennedy talking about the transition. I watched those very religiously to just kind of ease my own stress about the matter. There was a funny joke on Parks and Rec when the sale was happening that I think Ben Wyatt, one of the characters, was getting a massage, and the massage therapist was like, What are you so stressed about?" And he's like, "The next upcoming Star Wars film." And I was like, "That was me. That was me. I was worried about it." And then once The Force Awakens actually be sitting in the theater and then seeing the Crawl episode 7 and saying, "Okay, great, they're having a Crawl." So that was something I didn't know was going to be a thing. Maybe they were going to throw all that away, and uh, all that kind of went out the window, my stress, and I've really been enjoying everything absolutely ever since, and just became more and more a fan of all this stuff throughout the years, and more appreciative of the history, and going to the parks a lot more. It's just become a very integral part of everything that I do. So D23, 2017, I believe, was the first time that I heard that such a thing existed, this very specific Disney convention. 2017 was also Celebration Orlando, and that was the big Last Jedi push. The famous This Time for the Jedi to End trailer premiered there, and Solo was also in the upcoming purview of things that were to be coming out. That was supposed to come out that following May of 2018, and because The Last Jedi was so prevalent at Star Wars Celebration and it wasn't talked about too much, a lot of people were speculating that Solo would have more of a presence at D23. Now, of course, there was a lot of ups and downs with Solo over the course of those interim months between, I think D23 was July that year. That's when Lord and Miller famously was kicked out of the project. Ron Howard brought in a whole, Alden Ehrenreich having to hire an acting coach and kind of all the things behind the scenes on that thing. They ultimately didn't show a whole. They didn't talk about Solo at all. But that was kind of the conversation going into D23 was, okay, maybe they'll have some more information about this. A lot of the sites that I was following at the time did a great job covering that first D23 in 2017 that I actually paid attention to. The thing that struck me the most was the fact that there was the entertainment showcase, which they historically do for this event, and they had the first showing, the first footage, I should say, of Avengers: Infinity War and that screening. And the people that came out of that theater that immediately recorded their reactions and uploaded it straight to YouTube for people like me to watch were just absolutely blown away that they showed the footage of Thanos throwing the planet at various Avengers in that movie. And I was like, they're really showing video footage of Thanos throwing a planet at the Avengers? First off, that's a mind-blowing sentence to even be speaking into existence, but the fact that they were willing to showcase that to people inside of a kind of behind closed doors venue like this really showcased to me that Disney wasn't just playing around. Like, this wasn't just pin traders coming together and trading pins. Like, I know it's kind of the stereotype that people have for this kind of thing, but the fact that they are actually very serious about the stuff that they put behind the weight of this convention, and like, wow, if they're doing that, then what else are they having here? 2019, I was paying attention to this. This, of course, was the Disney Plus launch for at D23. That's where Ewan McGregor comes out and he says, "You want me to play Obi-Wan Kenobi again? Ask me to do it." And then she says, Kathleen Kennedy asks him, "Would you like to play Obi-Wan Kenobi again?" He goes, "Yeah." And that's how Obi-Wan was announced formally. K2SO, Alan Tudyk and Cassian Andor came out on stage to announce that project formally too. Once all that, I believe the first Mando trailer was unveiled as well at this at D23 back in 2019. So all that to say, this once you have all that on the board, I thought, okay, this is definitely something I need to be at some point in the future. Fast forward, I was able to go to Celebration in 2022 at Anaheim, the convention center, which is also where they house D23 at every time they have had it to this point. So I had some familiarity with the space. Didn't get to go to London in 2023 for Star Wars Celebration, fortunately. And now that I'm going to 2 conventions per year in support of Force Ghost Conversations and the work that we're doing here in order to grow our brand and all that stuff. I thought, what are the places I can go that I think will have the most visibility and perhaps Lucasfilm will have the most presence at this year? I know I am not going to Japan. That is not something that I can feasibly make happen next year. Frankly, I don't even look at years anymore. I think it's still the academic year in terms of things. So it feels like it's later this year that Star Wars Celebration is. So that'll be, I think, April. So that's definitely upcoming on the calendar, but I can't stomach that flight for 3 days of a Star Wars convention. I just can't do it. So I thought, okay, D23, once that was announced back in September of last year to be this August, so just a couple weeks ago now. Once that was announced, I said, I'm absolutely doing this. I'm going. I imagine because I believe that Lucasfilm and Disney are trying to go to this every other year Star Wars Celebration D23 model, which seems to line up with 2027 being the next Star Wars Celebration, being the 50th, of course. I don't think they would do one in between there. It just seemed like all those years when they kind of like were either 2 months or 3 months after each other, they were just competing with each other for announcements, especially with Lucasfilm. And I know with San Diego Comic-Con also being close by, like they're also competing with each other with the Marvel stuff too. So now that they've kind of found their footing in this, all right, we're doing this one year, we're doing this one year. I thought this is the perfect year to do D23 because I think Lucasfilm will have such a large presence here. And that's ultimately what led me to decide I want to do this, just not only to because I'm a fan of the Disney brand and the content that they produce just overall, and I'd like to go walk around the show floor where they have all the stuff here that I like to see just beyond Star Wars. I think it's healthy to be a fan of things beyond just the galaxy far, far away. But I also thought that, and my gamble paid off because Lucasfilm did have a really massive presence there, and I'm glad that I was able to report on it to everybody back at home.
Did you have to have like a membership D23, or can you kind of explain how that works and what's kind of, because it's kind of like, we hear, especially when you talk to folks talking about vintage days, you hear about the old Star Wars fan club, but D23, is it kind of like a fan club? And do you need that to kind of do T23?
Yeah, so to get first access to tickets, you do need to be a D23 Gold member, which is a paid membership. It's about $100 per year in order to have access to that first wave of tickets. If they have any after, like, let's say the first 2 or 3 days, because that's kind of how it was this year, then they will open up to anybody that is a D23 member. So they have a free membership for D23 as well. This year, it didn't get to the free membership. It was all sold out before it even got to that. So you either need to be a member yourself in order to be able to get in the queue to even have a chance to buy tickets, or you got to know somebody that is a member and ask them to buy them for you and then send them the money. Either way, I think it will work, but that's initially how you purchase your ticket for D23. Of course, they have the 3-day option, 3 one-days. That's how you get into the convention center to begin with. Now, also this year, they also implemented a new thing where all the big panels of the evening, so the entertainment showcase, the parks presentation, the Legends ceremony, all of those 3 big marquee events were taking place at the Honda Center just down the road, which is where the Anaheim Ducks play. And that's a big, large hockey arena that can fit some 12, 13,000 people in there to see these big marquee events. That was an additional cost on top of your 3-day ticket in order to have a seat there. So if you were in the 400 level section, which I think most people were probably gunning for, because if you bought your ticket for one of those nights, you had to buy them for all 3 nights basically. So you had your same seat Friday, Saturday, Sunday for that, and that's kind of how it went. They had a limited number on the first day they came out. Once those were gone, then they released another set the second day, and then if they had any, they would go to the 3rd day for the Honda Center. So I think it was like an extra $150 for the 400 level, so $100 ticket plus the $150, $250. It was about your base minimum for a 3-day, all 3 marquee presentations kind of ticket experience for D23. Now, if you wanted to go to the 200 level, the 100 level, the show floor, now those are where your tickets are getting more expensive, and that kind of priced me out because by the time that I got to purchase tickets, only the show floor, maybe about 4 rows away from the stage, was available, and those were looking at $1,000 a piece. And I really could not stomach that one. So I said, okay, I'm just buying the 3-day pass, and the convention center is open from 9 to 7. All the announcements will be on Twitter from people live tweeting there, and all the trailers will also and concept art will be available online. And as they are being presented. So like the Skeleton Crew trailer that came out, I watched it almost before people actually in the arena watch it because of course they can never time things perfectly. So I think I was sitting in a pizza shop as I was watching that trailer on Catella there. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the logistics for how this thing works. I think it worked pretty well. I know they're like, especially with the Star Wars Celebration, it's the same thing. You get into a virtual queue, you wait till your moment, and then you go for it. I don't think at this point there's no better system for doing these kind of things. For all these mass people just going to to a website and trying to buy tickets at the same time, right? You need that virtual queue, otherwise it's going to shut down the site, and it's kind of the luck of the draw, which I'm fine with. You know, it's just kind of the way that it falls into the cracks. Nothing you can do about it.
It was interesting because on your show, when you were talking to Matt about the Honda Center, and there was even logistics there of like, well, you have to figure out to get yourself over to the Honda Center, and of course you couldn't take stuff over there. They were limiting. Yeah. And I would say Celebration Chicago, it kind of makes sense because when they were doing some of the announcements at, I think the UIC Pavilion, or there was a arena across the street, you know, there was going to be a limit on what you could take over there. So in which case you had to also figure out, all right, how am I going to get over there? Although I think they had buses or whatnot, but then getting back and then that wait. And I was kind of surprised when you're talking about folks that probably were waiting almost 2 hours. Now this is at the end of a long day, and then you've got to wait, and then you get back to, you know, the rally point at the Anaheim Convention Center, and then get back to your, you know, to get back to your hotel. Were you like close by? Were you walking distance, or were you sort of an Uber ride to the convention center?
So my hotel was within walking distance for sure. Okay. It was probably on the, depending on what kind of person you are, some may consider it to be Uber distance. It was about a 15-minute walk in the morning for me, which I think was a nice way to kind of start the day. It's not bad at all. It was actually closer by a block than the hotel I stayed at for Celebration. So I every time I go back, I inch myself a little bit further. I would recommend if anyone's looking to do this in the future, try and stay as close as you can to the convention center itself for a variety of reasons. You're going to be buying stuff. It's just a lot easier to go back and forth. You may get something free that you weren't expecting that you have to lug around the entirety of the show on one day.
You never know when you're going to buy a raffle.
You know, like to haul that back and then to find where you want to eat afterwards, it kind of throws your plans off the rails a bit. So if you stay close by, or closer than what I did per se, you have yourself a little bit more flexibility to go back to your room, drop things off, then come back and not be, I wouldn't say burdened, but to be having to lug around things a bit larger than you were expecting to do. Because I was seeing that, like, I don't know if you saw that Star Tours exclusive that they had there, that speeder that they had that plays the original ride. I was definitely eyeing that piece, but it was once I saw how large it was and having the experience of lugging a certain Dark Millennium Falcon Lego set that I won, I was kind of pulled away from the idea of purchasing that. Plus, it was also $300, and I wasn't ready to throw down the money for that.
It is interesting, as I was wondering, like, when you were doing your budgeting, like, I liked the idea of, like, all right, I'm going to go to X and Z, and then that way I can kind of really not only get it, you know, return on my investment from going, but I can have the most fun there as opposed to, like, you know, going to multiple events. But yeah, I mean, do you feel that you budgeted yourself as well as you could to kind of like, all right, there's going to be stuff there that's just going to be like, all right, I cannot not walk home with this. But then again, considering the did you go to the Honda Center like all 3 nights?
No, so I only got to go the Sunday night. I was able to procure a ticket for that. So I did get a little bit of the Honda Center experience and the flair of that, which I think by that point they had really ironed out all of the issues and logistical problems that they may have had that first day. I thought as soon as they announced that, like, I thought, okay, that Friday is going to be pretty troublesome for a lot of people because it's the first time they're doing this thing. They're going to have some growing pains when it comes to this, but definitely by Saturday and certainly by Sunday, they will have everything figured out once they've done it a few times. Yeah, that's kind of, that was a good experience, I'll say. Yeah.
let's talk about now. Remind me now, has D23 always been in one place, or do they flip between, let's say, Orlando and Anaheim? I would imagine that they would keep them not, they don't do like celebrations up and around. They're going to be close to the parks.
Correct. So D23 historically, what formerly was called D23 Expo, now it's called the D23, the Ultimate Fan Disney Fan Event, is always going to be, as far as I know, in the Anaheim Convention Center.
Gotcha.
On the off years, so every other year, so next year, they will have what's called Destination D23, which is the kind of smaller version of it that they will have here in Orlando, somewhere on Disney property, for just a smaller set. I think it's only 2 days. A little bit more limited in terms of the panel presentations that they have in the show floor, of course.
No volume.
No, I don't think the volume will show up there. I don't think they're lugging that across country. So that is that. And then also somehow in November, they're trying to do some extra D23 in Brazil. So that's coming up in November. That's the first that they're doing something like this. So I don't know if they're kind of just testing the waters or if they have plans to announce a South American Disneyland. Who knows? But they haven't really announced a whole lot about that yet. So stay tuned, frankly, folks, for more information on that one. But historically, yes, D23 itself, the big event, is always in the Anaheim Convention Center. It's blocks away from Disneyland. It's kind of their home base. They know what they're doing there. It's not their first rodeo with this thing. And you could tell that as you were going through the show floor and just getting through security. And it's run by Disney too. It's not run by like a Reed Pop an external, or even by fans themselves, right? It's done entirely professionally. These are people's jobs. They are paid members. They're paid by Disney to run D23, and that's their job 24/7, is to make sure this event is fantastic. So everybody, from even the volunteers that they have to paid staff, knew exactly where everything was and where it should be, and had everything really mapped out easily for people.
So let's get into the bones as far as I've been to Celebration Anaheim. If I'm going to D23 at Anaheim, what are the differences? I'm going into the convention center. I kind of have a visual of that, but on the show floor, or if there is a show floor, what am I seeing and what am I not seeing that I would be kind of expecting to see?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you're going to see a lot of different experiences. That's the way that D23, at least in this iteration, had kind of everything laid out. So they had big things on the show floor itself. Lucasfilm had its own pavilion where they had the volume. They brought actually a piece, not just a piece, but a whole section of the volume to D23 that was currently being used to film The Mandalorian and Grogu. So they took a weekend off from filming, brought that thing over from somewhere in Los Angeles where they're filming currently, and then set it up in the Anaheim Convention Center. So you would have that. You have there was the whole Marvel Studios experience where you would walk through it, and you basically, like, you're a member of the TVA. You got assigned a position within the TVA, and you got to see all the different types of suits and armor things and just props that they have from Marvel Studios throughout the history. And of course, they had some upcoming things for Agatha All Along, which is the new series that's coming out in September for them. So they were promoting that to a large degree. Disney Plus had its own experience where you could like recreate the Homer Simpson meme with going into the bushes. So it was a fun thing there. They had like the Magneto's table from, or Professor X's I guess his table set up from X-Men 97 that you could take a photo op with. They had the whole, I guess, the villains, the pirates from Skeleton Crew, the whole costumes for them set up. So I got to take pictures with them, of course, too. I don't know if, again, Hulu is also a part of the Disney family as well now. So things like The Bear, Shogun, Only Murders in the Building, these things also had a presence and had their own experience at D23, so you could walk through the Hulu experience. And I hadn't seen The Bear up until last week, so when I watched all 3 seasons in very quick succession, but a lot of people waited in a long line in order to walk through the Bear experience, which was basically just getting yelled at by people. As if you're walking through a kitchen getting yelled at. I don't know why people waited in line personally to be like 20-30 minutes at a time to be yelled at and then to get a pin at the end. So that was really cool. Avatar had its own pavilion. You'd walk through it and you'd see all the various like set designs and models that they had in order to make Pandora come to life, especially with the upcoming films. Imagineering had its own pavilion too, where they had actual Imagineers there, and they were talking about the upcoming things that were coming to Disney parks, and especially once the parks presentation happened, then they were able to showcase this whole other area that they had kind of roped off, that had all these different types of concept art for new things that are coming to the parks, which is really exciting. Basically, everything underneath the Disney umbrella had some sort of pavilion or experience there. So we're talking like the cruise line had something there, and I think they had their own Mickey meet and greet there. The Disney Fairy Tale Weddings had its own kind of setup there. The Walt Disney Family Museum had its own separate establishment too. Am I missing anything else at this at this point? National Geographic had its own Hex Lab, where it's like 8 different screens, basically blasting different sounds and sights at you for a good 20 minutes. That was a wild experience personally to endeavor with. All that was there. They had stuff from the Walt Disney Archives there. So just a lot more experiences, I would say, on the show floor itself. And within all those pavilions, at least for the most part, they would have their own specific panels within them. So at the Lucasfilm Pavilion, for example, that's where they would had a whole day's worth of programming, not on any of the stage shows like you might recall the podcaster stage from Star Wars Celebration. They had like all the other various smaller stages where they had things. But they actually had that within the Lucasfilm Pavilion itself, and a stage connected to the volume so that they could do these presentations and use the volume as their computer monitor behind them and just click through their slideshows on the volume behind them. It was truly a magnificent sight. But across the way, they would have like the Disney on Broadway kind of presentations too, and they would have various actors and actresses come out on stage and do vocal shows and little renditions of the various Disney on Broadway productions they have going on. So just, I would say in terms of the show floor itself, it's a lot more experiences. Perhaps one might say it was more produced, but I would definitely say it felt more professional along just the experience overall. Star Wars Celebration, in contrast, they would have some of those booths like that, like like your standard, your Lounge Flies, your Funko Results, whatever that T-shirt company's called. I never can tell exactly what it's called.
Oh, Roosevelt's.
Lunch. Is that what it's called? Roosevelt's? The RVSVLT?
Yeah, they have the.
Is that really called Roosevelt's? I could have. Man, they don't. Okay, I just assumed it was Results the entire time. Roosevelt's. Okay. Well, you learn something new every day.
They had some San Diego. A friend of the show, Cameron, was. I came real close to getting a. They had kind of like the top Star Wars logo one that was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, and I came this close, but I was like,
yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, they do a lot of cool shirts. I know that
they had live exclusives there, and I could never get in because the line was pretty long. But they had that Ravensburger, the Lorcana game card that they do was very popular too. That was a very big line all the time. So that was kind of it for the show floor. I would say in contrast again to Star Wars Celebration, it felt like there was not as many like rows and rows of just like, in a way, regular people selling their somehow getting a booth at Star Wars Celebration and then putting out their boxes full of like opened action figures that they were selling for like $5 to $10, and then the variety of different T-shirts that they'll sell behind you. So it didn't have that kind of fan kind of driven nature, except for like this little corner that they had where they had a little bit of that, but it wasn't as many of the rows that you see at a Star Wars Celebration. Now, they also didn't have the tattoo section that Star Wars Celebration famously has. They swapped that out for pin trading. So that was, of course, again, the stereotypical Disney thing was there to a large degree. And definitely the meet and greets. So like the signings, the photographs were not as plentiful as a Star Wars Celebration would have, but it honestly seemed more put together than I know the meet and greets and autographs can go for Star Wars Celebration, as sometimes if an actor is running behind or they're taking too long, that can take a lot of time out of someone's day. They seem to be moving those a bit more faster, of course, but naturally Disney too likes to make money, so they had, I think, at least 4 or 5 different types of show marketplaces which sold a variety of different things depending on what you were into. So of course they had the pin trading section. They had a different store which kind of focused on more high end material. The big standard show floor was where you would find the store at Anaheim, where with the Star Wars Celebration, which was in the other building. So that was kind of, I would say, the big differences on the show floor was definitely a lot more experiences, and it felt like in a way that they were like showcasing all of the wonderful things underneath the Disney umbrella and why you should be a part of this and why you should watch the cool stuff that they have and support it.
So you would probably not see Ma and Pa vendor from that would be more of an independent vendor. You would probably
Right.
see only official type merch or official tie-in, type merch. So it's kind of like going to an Apple store and getting the accessories there, as opposed
Yes.
to going to Fry's Electronics and going, oh hey,
Absolutely.
here's that third party thing. But what about like an artist alley or something like that you'd see at a normal con?
They had a little bit of that. Yeah, basically I would say mostly 95% of the show floor was the produced kind of thing like that, versus the 5%, which was in a back corner where they had your artist alley, basically, as you would
Close
call
to the
it.
street.
It was kind of tucked away behind many things. I struggled to find it personally, and because that's where they had the WDW radio booth was out there, and I was curious to find that because I was like, I know they're here somewhere, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to make my way out to their booth as well, and that's kind of where that was enclosed within.
Oh, that's funny. So you have experiences. So basically, do you felt like it took up about the same size? I mean, the Anaheim Convention Center is huge. Do you felt that it was about the same size or maybe a little smaller than Anaheim Celebration?
Oh, I think it was the same size.
Oh, wow.
They definitely utilized all space available. There was no dead space utilized within this convention whatsoever. It's amazing that Star Wars can even fill out such a thing with all the stuff they got going on. But with all the things underneath the Disney umbrella, they were able to have something for everybody there, which was really spectacular. So if you were a fan of, let's say, Disney parks, you could tailor your experience exactly to only be Disney parks, between the show floor experiences, the panels that you would attend. You could literally have the 3 days of nothing but park stuff and finding more information about the parks. For example, I tailored my experiences to only Lucasfilm things. So I did every single panel at the Lucasfilm Pavilion. I also did the show floor too, but I did no other panels. So we've been referencing my conversation with Matt Richardson. He had a completely different D23 experience than I did, which I think was a so cool, fantastic thing, that we never crossed paths once during the entirety of the convention. And he was off doing so many other cool things, and I was doing my cool things. And then it allows us to come at the end of the day, come together and say, oh, what'd you do? And what did I do? And then we could swap stories about all the cool things that we saw. And it felt very much like no two experiences were the same, which I think was a really cool thing about the convention that probably you can only get at a D23.
Do you feel like, for example, someone like me who would be, I like me some indie, I do like some Disney, but predominantly would be Star Wars. Do you feel if you were sort of like attuned to maybe one or the other, that you would get enough as far as getting your money's worth?
Yeah. I felt like I got my money's worth for sure. Even just doing the Star Wars stuff alone, I think the offerings that they had were world class, and I'm really thrilled with what they had offered for us there. I will say too, because of the nature of D23 and not everyone there is going gunning for Star Wars stuff, for example, it allowed me to feel like I was getting these special experiences, that because I was tailoring my experience and I knew that I wanted to do these things, I knew I could just stand in line and eventually just get in to this stuff. Like I didn't have to worry about missing out on something else, because I knew these were the only offerings for Star Wars. So if I wanted to do them, I'd cut out other stuff, of course, but I made it happen. I manifested these experiences coming to life for myself, which I think was really great. And it felt small and intimate, and it wasn't like everyone was bulldozing down the door. Everyone there wasn't the biggest Star Wars fan. I feel like I was probably among an outlier group that I was only there for primarily the Star Wars stuff at this convention. And it allowed me to have these experiences like meeting Vanessa Marshall, seeing Manny Jacinto, seeing all the great creature work that Legacy Effects brought on stage there, to see the volume in person for 3 days in a row, which is still blowing my mind that they did such a thing. To meet Nubs, it was a wonderful experience. Like the things that you can only do if you're, I mean, if you're into Star Wars, like this is absolutely the stuff that you want to do. And if you're a casual fan and you maybe just want to see the volume as you're walking by, and you're like, that's cool, then I was there for you too. So it kind of met everyone's kind of needs and expectations, I would say, across the board. If you're just a casual fan or if you're a hardcore fan, they had something for everybody there. And if you wanted to put the time and effort in to see all the stuff, then absolutely that was an option for you. Just as a convention goer, you know that you need to manifest things for yourself sometimes. If you really want to do that panel, then you have to cut things out of your day and be flexible with other things in order to make it happen. And once you know the rules of the system itself, then I think the sky's the limit in terms of what you can accomplish at this type of convention.
Now, I did 2 events, I wouldn't say back-to-back, but I went to the National Sports Collectors Convention in Cleveland, and then, of course, Fan Expo Chicago. Both had, now I would say Fan Expo was a little worse as far as crushing crowds. These were like, you were not, there was no swinging your arms around in most of the places. The National was, there was more lines and things like that. How do you feel the crowds compared to, say, like Celebration Chicago or Celebration Anaheim?
So I think the crowds were a lot bigger at Star Wars Celebration than they were for D23. I think perhaps the paywall helped in this instance, right? It's kind of amazing knowing how busy it was, knowing that either all those people were D23 Gold members or they knew somebody that was a D23 Gold member. So that's a lot of money in Disney's pocket in order to even attend this thing to begin with. But don't get me wrong, it was full, right? You had to queue for things, and depending on when you queued for things, it could have taken longer than other things. Obviously, I think Friday is the day that the first day of a convention is usually the day that people, if you are the type of person that wants that exclusive and you want it first, or maybe you're trying to buy it so you can then sell it on eBay quickly for the person that's at home to buy it. That was a big thing that a lot of people were doing, and if you're smart, you'll take advantage to not do that type of thing and utilize the free space for other things. So I never felt overwhelmed with everything at the convention. It wasn't like I was walking through the show floor and was like, golly gee, there's people everywhere. I am feeling just claustrophobic because of everything. No, I was always able to find I was able to get into every panel just by queuing for it on standby. I was able to get into all the experiences I wanted to just by queuing and standby, and those will only take about 20 to 30 minutes, which I think is a really respectable amount of time in order to get through those things. The food lines were never long, which I think is a very important thing to talk about too. They really stepped up their game, I would say, from Celebration in 2022, where it was primarily just the food trucks. They didn't have a whole lot of offerings inside the Anaheim Convention Center itself, but I think they stepped up their food offerings inside the convention hall itself.
Oh, wow.
So that really took away a lot of the burden on those food trucks in order to sustain however 20,000 people were there that day to feed them for lunch and various snacks. So that really helped to mitigate crowd flow. I think that this is my only, I think that what they did in practice is a good thing, but I think I'll explain it. This is the whole thing here. So all of the stores, the marketplace stores, all 5 of them, the only way you could access any of them was by getting a virtual queue time slot. So you had to sign up for that either in the morning or at 1 o'clock. They had a second opening again where you could then re-sign up and then get your time to go into one of the 5 show floor marketplace things that they had where you could get the merch and all that stuff. So I think in practice that worked because there was no standby line that kept that line moving. I know at Celebration, a lot of people didn't get that virtual queue for either that or the Mandalorian experience, and that caused both of those standby lines to be astronomically long, and that took a lot of time out of people's days. Knowing that you have a queue time, you can do other stuff, go back when your time is called. I walked right in. Once that happened, I was able to buy the stuff I wanted, my nice teak doll that they had there from the Ewok Adventures, and properly walked out and then went back to my day. So that really only took about 5, 10, 15 minutes out of my time in order to do that purchasing. So I think that worked overall in practice. Now, the thing that did not sit well with me was the fact that uh, the time that you had to sign up for this virtual queue in the morning was 4 a.m.
Ooh.
4 a.m., Greg. That was ridiculous in my opinion. So I think they could move that to about a respectable 7 a.m. and call it a day. So that's my only criticism really across the board when it comes to D23 at large, was that they should move up the virtual queue time slots for the show floor marketplaces stuff. But I will say I never felt like anything was too daunting to get into. I will say again, my experiences were limited to the Lucasfilm Pavilion, but they had everything so nicely and logistically sound that they would have people. Everyone also had a chance to sign up for lightning lanes, kind of similar to a celebration too, where you sign up for all the panels you want to begin with, and then like the day, 2 or 3 days before the convention starts, they send you an email saying, "Great, here are your lightning lanes that you get automatic entry for to these panels." And then they let that group in, and then if there's room, there's always room. They will let a standby line in afterwards, and I was able to get in everything I wanted via standby line. So logistically, everything was very sound. I didn't feel overwhelmed, and I think it also helped too. Like I keep saying, that not everyone was there primarily for Star Wars. They were drawn into other things. Their fandoms took them elsewhere. So for a person that was primarily there for Star Wars stuff, it allowed me to just have that unique. I felt very special. Just a unique experience again about having that intimate experience with the volume and the people on stage and talking about it. And I was able to get up close and personal with a lot of people that I'd really respected all these years in this trade and the Lucasfilm team and craft that they do. And just really great to hear them tell the stories from a few feet away.
Well, and I think what was pretty stunning is that you were sending back these pictures of, people who were either in a panel, out of a panel, on the show floor, and you go, well, there's Vanessa Marshall. There was, it was a quick shot of John Favreau.
John Favreau. Oh yeah.
But I would have taken that same shot. I'm going, damn straight am I going to post this because it was there. But it kind of felt like you're like, well, this is a little different. Like, you might see that shot of, if Filoni decides he wants to, make the run the gamut of the show floor at Celebration. He's going to make it. There should be the over under on how soon he's tagged, and then everybody mobs for it. But this felt like they didn't maybe feel like they were going to get mobbed. They were just out there to have some fun and maybe work the crowd a little bit. But is that kind of your feeling? Would that be something like if you went to D23, expect to probably see somebody on the floor, maybe not the top line, but if you're paying attention and you've got your checklist on you, hey, there's that person from that thing.
Oh yes, for sure. There were, every time I turned my head, I'd be like, oh, it's that person. Oh, it's that person. They're walking around. If you're a fan of like just Imagineering, like the people behind the scenes at Disney that are making the rides and the experiences for the parks particularly, they walk around like without any protection or anything like that. Like I'm just like, oh, I know you from this documentary. I know you from that. I've seen you on the various things that I've seen. That's pretty cool. But again, like make no mistake, a John Favreau will walk around, and Dave Filoni also will walk around. Bob Iger himself walked the show floor a lot. Wow. He was out and about, and he only had like a handful of security around him. He was there to mingle with people. Like they were there to have a good time and to see all the things. So John Favreau, when I caught that picture, that was him coming out of the Avatar experience, and I actually had a quick little interaction with him. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my phone was on the other side versus I was trying to get a quick selfie with him, and I couldn't get the camera around quickly to get that quick shot with him. So I quickly turned it around again and got the picture of him walking away. But I did tell him that he rocks, and he said thank you.
Well, it's interesting because it's like when you're going to regular show events. I mean, these are people you would pay money for a stage shot. But if you're saying that it's possible to grab a selfie with, I mean, if you factor, it's like that's probably worth it alone to go. Like, yeah, here's Vanessa Marshall, or here's this, and it probably is a more personable shot. Because it wasn't something where you were in line and you got filtered through in fashion and then you didn't really say too much. Even if you didn't get a picture and just say, hey, look, I got my few words in, how are you with a
Yeah.
pen for, like, sign this. But I think that is encouraging. And I would even say for the off shows, like you're talking about, what did you call them? A Destination D? Is that what you?
Yeah, Destination D is what they have here in Orlando every other year.
You would hope that maybe that's even a little more low key, quote unquote, for Disney in this millennium, where it's not going to be as big, maybe, or or whatnot, and you could say, all right, get your checklist out and start memorizing the people for the Imagineers. Going, that's that.
Yeah.
At any rate,
I will say, just in general, I felt like this was a manageable convention, right? I feel like I did everything I wanted to do. I felt like I had ample time to do it, both in terms of the panels I wanted to attend, and the experiences on the show floor, and also getting a chance to go the to the stores, the marketplaces, and checking out all the merchandise that I had wanted to do. Everything that was on my personal checklist, I got through very easily without any stress or worry of able to accomplishing those things. So I think just from a logistical standpoint of a fan attending this, I felt very happy with the output that I had in terms of what I expected to do versus what I actually got to do.
very cool. So the final question is, would you go back, knowing that you have Destination D in your backyard? You're close to the parks, you're close to Disney Springs and all that. Would you go back, and how would you may do it differently next time?
Yeah, so I'm definitely planning on going back. I think this is one that I will have on the calendar as soon as they announce it, right? I think this, because I took that gamble of thinking, well, because of every other year, if they're going to do this model of a Star Wars celebration at D23, they're going to have things to talk about. And boy, golly, did my prediction come to pass in some way, shape, or form. It was kind of a little dicey before the week leading up to it, I will say, in terms of my feelings on that one, because they had just announced that just the volume would be there. They hadn't announced their full slate of panels that they had yet. So they didn't, until a week leading up to D23, they hadn't said that Manny Jacinto was going to be there, that Vanessa Marshall was going to be there, that Doug Chang was going to be there, that the Nubs meet and greet was going to be there. It was just basically 4 panels a day of what seemingly was the same volume presentation that they did. Which would have been fine. I would have done that. And I kind of had a back in my mind thing of what else I was going to do. So like I knew Michael Giacchino was going to be there, a Star Wars connection via Rogue One, who has done a lot of Pixar and Marvel stuff. He was going to do a Marvel music panel. And I thought, okay, if I'm at least in the room, maybe he'll say a tidbit or two about his work on Rogue One. I knew that ILM was going to have a little bit of a presentation on the work that they've been doing with the What If Vision Quest thing for virtual reality that they've been working with Marvel on. So I thought, okay, maybe someone from ILM will be there to chat about that. Maybe I can get a quick photo with them after the presentation. And then, of course, Lucasfilm, a week out from D23, dropped this huge slate of stuff, including a Q&A with Manny Jacinto, which I think was kind of top tier on a lot of people's lists. Athena Portillo and Vanessa Marshall were there to talk about Star Wars animation. I think because we don't know what our next animation project is, that there was potential for a conversation in that one to be announced, some new things potentially. It didn't come to pass, but I think that was a lot of things on people's radar. And of course, just to see the volume in action and Doug Chang talk about the volume, Legacy Effects showcasing a Loth Cat in action. Hugh Yang, got to see him work the puppetry on that thing. Kuiil caught on fire, the puppet for that. So it's a good thing that unfortunately that character has passed, because I don't think they're going to be able to use that model anymore. Just to showcase all of that was just a wonderful thing. And knowing that this is kind of the expectation that this was a top tier level of experience that felt very intimate too, because not everybody was there for that, and I got to do everything that I wanted to do, and Star Wars definitely came out with a top tier level of content for this. I think it's absolutely something that is should be at the forefront of all Star Wars fans. If you're into conventions and wanting to meet people and have access to things, this is definitely a place to be at, because I think it's only going to get better in the future, I would argue.
Right.
I think if this is the year where they really cemented that they are going to have a presence at this beyond just like a panel here or two here and there, or maybe just showcasing a trailer at the whatever entertainment panel they have the big entertainment thing that they're going to do. Um, I think it's only going to go up from here. So who knows where the future goes? I think the fact that it's in LA is a big help, so that
Right.
they can get actors out there pretty easily without having to haggle them too much. Yeah, I was 2 feet away from Manny Jacinto as he got to talk to a little bit about the Acolyte and how excited he was for a second season, and it's to be able to thank him for the hard work and dedication that he clearly put into his work on that show was I would experience I would never take back, and to be able to hug Nubs and to meet that wacky furball was totally cool. You know, I was able to chat with Athena Portillo, the head of Lucasfilm Animation, and just to say thank you for all the hard work you've done. I'm excited to see the future. And she said, "Yeah, I can't wait for everybody to see what we got coming up next." And like,
Oh, man.
to hear that directly from the person's mouth that is putting this stuff together, it makes me very excited as a fan. And not to drop any like exclusives there because I don't really have anything, but it's just exciting to hear like, okay, they have stuff in the pipeline, and I'm excited to see it because I've really generally enjoyed all the stuff that they have coming out in the future. Like, it's fun to have that level of access, and no one was standing around her, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go say hi and see if I can get a picture.
That is
Rob
so
Reed
cool.
out too from ILM, the chief officer at ILM, who did a lot of work behind the scenes on Solo and for the visual effects for that, a film that I absolutely adore. You know, he did the presentation about the volume in the morning, and I still have really no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to the volume, but I was a fan of the volume to begin with. But once you actually see that thing in practice, I got to be in the volume, which was another fun experience that you
Amazing.
got to do. They send you a video of yourself in the volume with this R5D4 beside you and an X-wing, and you don't even know where reality ends, where reality doesn't begin anymore. It's so amazing to see it actually working in person. The size and scope is something that I also cannot quantify and just in talking and speaking terms. Like it's something you have to see to believe. And I always tell people I was a big believer in the volume to begin with. Like I thought that the things that it can do for storytelling and the fact that it was able to bring Star Wars to the small screen in a cinematic way in ways that we had never done before was going to be absolutely game changing for the entertainment industry. But now that I've seen it actually work in person and in practicality, I'm a disciple of the volume. Like I'm going to be singing that thing's praises until my dying breath. Like this thing rocks the. They played a fun game with us in the presentation. They're like, all right, audiences think they know where reality ends and where the volume begins. So let's play. Here's a scene from Ahsoka. Where do you think the line ends and where it begins? And people are like, oh, we think it's this. And they're like, oh, actually, you're wrong. It's this. And then they'd show other things. They'd show like the new Percy Jackson show that's now on Disney Plus, and they'd go, okay, take this for example. Where's the line ends? Where does it start? And the audience would be like, oh, we think it's here. Nope, you're wrong again. They just kept blowing our minds every step of the way, and it's just so cool to be able to see that up close in person. And this is frankly an only at D23 experience, and that's just the show floor itself, right? The Hana Center I think offered up a lot of opportunities for people, and for Disney to be theatrical, be what it actually is. For those people that were in that room, they had wonderful experiences, and like I think they'll take some of the logistical challenges going back and forth in order to actually be in the room where it happens, so to speak. So I think D23 should absolutely be on everyone's calendar. It's on mine for sure. And I think that if we get enough people, maybe, maybe I'm giving away the best kept secret here because of how much access I felt like I got to be able to enjoy all this stuff and to not feel inundated with people. And if you tell enough people, then that changes quickly. But I do hope that this has a opportunity for a lot of Star Wars fans in the future to come to this, and maybe we can make it a mini celebration on off years if they continue to do this every other year cycle thing. So I hope that more people in the future come, and we can all be fun, loving Star Wars fans enjoying this stuff.
I love it, and you're right, because Greg Cass, from My Own Canon, and I both stayed at the same hotel, and he was able to accommodate me one night because I kind of goofed up my hotel reservation.
Yeah.
But those rooms were built for families, and here we're one person in a room that can fit different people. And if you're talking about obviously the cost of the airfare and the hotel and all those experiences, I mean you're not far off from what a Star Wars celebration would be. Yeah, making those decisions, or say, hey, we might want to meet over there, or even Orlando. Same, it's going to be kind of the similar, kind of be the same thing. What you're kind of telling me is that, hey, first and foremost, get your free D23 membership, because why not?
Yeah, it doesn't cost you a thing. So yeah, you get a
Right.
little bit of access and benefits based on that thing, and there's some discounts. So enjoy them.
Right, and then you could look for deals around the holidays or whatever. Not like it's kind of like a
Yes,
Rancho Obi-Wan membership, where if you're wanting to get into the gala or you're wanting to take a tour out there, it's good to get you can get your membership in,
absolutely.
and you feel
Yeah,
like you're with Rancho, you feel like you're contributing to like it is a charity. Disney is sort of
yeah.
sort of
Disney's
like
not a
it's
nonprofit
not a
organization.
nonprofit organization, but still. So yeah, I think that is something where, like I said, it was just something where it was like it's there, but I'm not quite sure what it is, how I would attack it, and that's what I was kind of hoping with this conversation, because I wanted it to be a kind
Yeah,
of complement, not a repeat of the D23 Extravaganza, which you did a very good job of, having Matt, having Danzer on there, but also having a lot to
absolutely.
say. And that's what I'm going to encourage people. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the Force Ghost Conversations episode on D23, there's a lot,
Yeah,
because you're going to go over the announcements. You're going to talk about the park stuff that I'm
absolutely.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, sure. But that's not something that I want you to kind of regurgitate. But the
sure.
thing that you are clearly stating is, I have enough to talk about for many podcasts. Call me. Yeah, it's like you're like,
There are. Yeah,
I'm for
frankly,
sale.
I will add too. Like I felt I was there by myself. I felt very welcome as a
Right.
person attending this convention. Some of the things that I really liked about the D23 experience overall. So I got there on a Wednesday. D23 officially started on that Friday. So that Thursday before, they had D23 day at Disneyland. There were a
Nice.
lot of people there that got in the day before, and they basically rolled out the red carpet for a lot of people. They gave a lot of free things. They had merch reveals there. New characters were out and about at the various parks. So at like Avengers Campus, they had a lot of people there, like Lady Thor and Sam Wilson, Captain America was out. A lot of characters that typically are not meet and greet experiences across the board, and whether it be Pixar, Marvel, even across the Disneyland. They had Merlin out from the Sword and Stone. Like they had a lot of just neat, deep cut characters out on display, and it was just a lot of fun to be a part of that. Downtown Disney, of course, is a wonderful experience for anybody that gets to go into the Anaheim area. For D23 members, they had a plethora of discounts at a variety of different things. So the restaurants that they have there, the churros, of course, are a big staple. Uh, if you got a discount on that type of stuff, that's a way to entice people to purchase these things. And I felt really welcomed and throw out my D23 card and be like, hey, I'm a member. I see we get a discount. And they'd be like, happy to give that to you. So it's just really wonderful to be in this kind of bubble that only the Anaheim Convention
Right.
Center can really offer because of that. And it's in the backyard. They know what they're doing. And the last thing that I'll really say about just really feeling welcome and how they won me from the start from this is, as soon as you got through security, they gave everybody three things. They had them lined up in big boxes as soon as you walked in, past the security gate, and they would then herd you to the next line where you would then queue to get into the convention center. Standard things for Anaheim and many other conventions, from what I understand. They would give everybody a map, so a printed map, foldable map of the entire show floor, which had all the pavilions, all the marketplace things that they had, where all the stages, where everything was located on one thing, rather than having to, that was my gripe from Anaheim, was that they just had, they said, go to the app, to go to the Star Wars Celebration app, and you'll find where all the things are located at there using this, uh, on your phone screen. And like, okay, great. Now I have to zoom in and find all this, and it's not really orienting very well. So that was just a big thing right there for me. I also liked that they gave everybody a lanyard as soon as you got through. So if you wanted to hook up your 3 day, like I had my 3 day pass, I didn't want to lose it. I also didn't want to be questioned if I had a ticket to get in here too often. So I threw that right on, and then they gave everybody a tote bag, which of course, as you're walking through the convention floor, there's going to be a ton of stuff. People are going to be handing out free things. You're going to get all these different types of merchandise potentially that you could buy, and to have it already in one tote bag that you can easily take home, or just make it easier as you're walking through the show floor. I think it worked. Now, the only problem with that tote bag is it could not fit this Dark Falcon, nor could it fit in my backpack, so I had to lug this thing around all day. So that, I think it was just a really well done and professionally done show from the start. And I think, as a person that does project management and logistics for my day job, I could tell that everything was thought through methodically. and to the nth degree, which I think really showcased in the final product that they had. Um, so overall, I think it was just a fantastic time. I hope a lot of people can hear my positivity about it, and perhaps that entices them to come in the future. Because again, you never know. I didn't anticipate getting a whole Lego set, but you never know what's going to happen at D23.
And that's one of those where it's like early and often to the spouse. This was free.
It was.
This
It
was
was
free. And
So
something
I
else.
won this. Well, I had to ship it home because it wasn't fitting in my carry-on either. So thankfully, there's a FedEx at the Hilton right beside the
Oh, that's right.
Anaheim Convention Center. So pro tip for anybody going to any future conventions there, if you come across something that you want to buy that's a little too big to fit in the suitcase, you can always ship it home for whatever fee that they have.
And just lastly, for those who are not aware, unlike Orlando, right? Orlando is way spread out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you were, where even where like I have a feeling that we were a little like Greg and I were a little closer to the convention center where you were. We were just north of, but
Yeah.
before not for the street. So you could walk from there to Disneyland.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't that hard. And Disneyland,
10 minutes at most. Yeah.
yeah, 10 minutes at most. Disneyland's right there. Downtown Disney is there. And so even if you went with your family and you said, well, I'm going to do this if you guys want to go to Disneyland, that is very viable. And, you know, and
Absolutely.
there's plenty around there. Unlike, say, with Orlando,
Or
where
if
it's
you
like,
just want to hang out in downtown Disney, or
Yeah.
the Disneyland Hotel, the Pixar Pier Hotel, the Grand Californian, those are all accessible.
right
You
there.
don't need to have a hotel stay in order to walk into those lobbies and to just milk the benefits of those places, which you'll find me often at the Grand Californian when I'm at the Anaheim area, which it's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place, and they're very welcoming and gracious with allowing people just to come in there and sit and relax and escape the heat if it's hot out, or just escape the crowds, because sometimes downtown Disney can get a little crowded with people, especially as the parks close towards the end of the day.
everybody's kind of heading out there to kind of like tune down a little.
Yeah,
or
they're funneling out there through that
funneling.
way for many of them. So that's it's I think the bubble that they've created there is really well done, and with all the announcements that they had, not to get into those deeply, but it's exciting that every time you go back, so let's say it's another 2 years from now, they'll have implemented a good many of the things that they announced there. So it's going to be a new experience for a lot of people when you go back in a few years. So keep that as a reason to go.
Yeah, and if you've seen like what Fanatics have done, you know, with Fanatics Fest, that was, you know, around about the same time, and then there are going to be probably doing one in the West. There is a interest for these entities to kind of control their own experience. Now, you know,
Yeah.
much to the dismay of, say, your Reed Pops or your Fan Expos or these large, you know, like, you know, convention runners. That, you know, you have a lot you can control, and a lot of that money stays put. So there's a vested interest, just like the parks, to keep that money
absolutely.
in. However, from what it sounds like, and which I kind of brought you on here, is to kind of make the case for it. Flying colors, and I really like how this, like, I wanted this to go down. Like I said, I didn't want it to be a repeat.
Great.
But you really did a nice job to kind of like, how is it different? What is all this?
Yeah, it's definitely different, just in general by nature of the content. But
Right.
there's going to be something for everybody. So that's the real benefit to that, and it's going to be very experience driven. The one last thing to note, as you were saying that there, like again, the benefit of Disney doing this in house was everybody knew where things were. So like if you had a question about where do I have a virtual queue, I'm group 2. For example, I'm like called first thing in the morning for the marketplace. Where do I need to go? Every person knew where you would queue for that.
Wow.
Where they're like, okay, you need to go to this line instead. You don't need to be in this line. We're taking you over here. We're going to escort you personally over there. Just really well done across the board. I'd say like, okay, is this the queue line for this? No, the queue line is right over here, and we're going to start opening this a half hour early before the event starts. So please disperse until then. We'll get you in. So just everybody was very knowledgeable about everything across the show floor, even if it wasn't their domain per se. I think that only happens if you have the structure and logistical nature behind a Disney basically paying their staff in order to know what everything is. And of course, it wasn't their first rodeo, which you could really tell.
Excellent. All right, sir. Well, I know that you won't. I am going to direct folks to listen to that extravaganza, which is I think one of your current episodes. But you won't be talking about this. You'll be talking about this for a while. But this is not the only thing you're going to be talking about on Force Ghost Conversations. What can we be looking forward to for seeing on the pod, hearing on the pod in the weeks and months to come?
Yeah, so we have a lot coming up in the near future here, which is really excited. So I'm actually going to be going to Paris in 2 weeks.
Nice.
So we'll be having a conversation about Disneyland Paris. So very excited to have that one. We'll be recording that tomorrow, actually. So looking forward to that for sure. And that'll be out, I think, next week, maybe this week, depending on how I want to showcase everything. But we will also be having some Indiana Jones discussions. So we'll be doing a yearly retrospective of Dial of Destiny, which came out last year. So be on the lookout for that in your podcast feeds. But we'll also in October be at ICCC, which was my second convention that I'll be at this year. And hopefully we'll be able to get some nice content and interviews from that convention as well, which and a full recap report, of course, as well as we get closer to that. So that's what you can expect in the next couple of weeks here from the podcast. But of course, anything in the Star Wars, Lucasfilm, and just Lucasfilm adjacent areas we'll be here to discuss too.
And where can they? I thought you were going to go. Go straight into that. I was like, he's such a pro. He's going to go right in there. I don't have to say it. But go ahead and tell people where they can find Force Ghost Conversations.
Yeah, of course. So they can find Force Ghost Conversations anywhere that generally podcasts can be found. So your Apples, your Spotify's, those are generally the top 2 places that people go to for podcasts. But if you're an Amazon Music kind of person, then boy, I can tell you we're there. Also, if you want to continue the conversation and just to see all the fun shenanigans that we had at D23, so I did a lot of taking of pictures and video snippets for people, especially of like the Vanessa Marshall panel and the Manny Jacinto panel. Those are available on our X feed as well, so you can find us at Force Ghost Pod. But we're also available on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. Just search for Force Ghost Conversations, and you'll find us in some capacity. And we look forward to chatting with everybody there.
Super. Anthony, once again, thank you for coming on. This was fun. This is kind of this is what I wanted to kind of go into the holiday weekend with, but this was the kind of questions that I had on D23 to find out if I should be putting it on my radar. And it sounds like
perfect. I hope I sold you. I wanted to throw the question back. Yeah.
I think I sold it. Because like I said, we have, Celebration Japan coming up, and of course we're a ways away from even an announcement of when the next celebration is. But the fact that, like when you're talking about where celebrations are, some people can do things if on the one coast, some people can do on the other coast, some people can just go to the stuff in the Midwest. So I like the fact you can get a little bit wherever you go, and you're seeing something a little bit different. And like you said, it's run by Disney, so it's it's not going to be
all in the house.
It's all in the house. It's not going to be super cheap, but it is going to be well run, and
well run. It's familiar.
Yeah,
yep,
exactly.
All that's on the table there.
All right, so I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you get back to the conversations over there at the Force Ghost. And we're going to let Card Squadron take it out. And I hope all of you have a great holiday weekend and a good start to your September. And we'll be talking soon.
Hi there, this is Dan Zaire from Coffee with Kenobi, and you are listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast. Great poll, kid.
The Rebel Base Card Podcast focuses on cards, collecting, and the Star Wars community, and appreciates you coming along for the ride.
If you have any feedback for this episode, you can reach out to the program in a number of ways. You can leave a comment on the Instagram post for this episode. You can also DM Greg on Instagram at Rebel Base Card.
Make sure to also follow the Rebel Base Card on Twitter and Facebook at Rebel Base Card. If you want, you can send an email to greg@rebelbasecard.com.
And you can find show notes for this and all episodes on the website rebelbasecard.com. In the Star Wars Card Trader app and just about every other one, you can find Greg at CornFedTech.
The Rebel Base Card uses the hashtag Card Squadron as a way to alert friends about cool cards and recent drops in the galaxy far, far away. It's a great way to bring our community a little bit closer together and help one another finish our sets in time. We collect, communicate, and commiserate. Well, at least when we run out of credits or crystals to spend on our digital collections. Join the fun, even if all the other cool squadron names were already taken. And remember, we collect as one, and would be honored if you join us.
And if you are a sketch card artist, or Star Wars artist or collector, cosplayer, and want to talk about your work, your craft or passion, drop Greg a line. I'm sure he'd love to hear your story. You can also help the show by leaving a comment or review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you got this episode.
Otherwise, the mission is clear. Keep those cards out of the hands of the Empire, and the Rebel Base card will return soon.
This podcast is not affiliated in any way with Topps, Disney, or Star Wars, nor is it endorsed by Disney or Lucasfilm, and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and/or copyright holders here in the U.S. and abroad. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com.
That's it.